We are taught that evolution is a story of perfection, a slow and steady march towards ideal design. But that is a comforting lie. The truth is far more chaotic and infinitely more fascinating. Evolution is a blind watchmaker, fumbling in the dark, and sometimes it creates something so bizarre, so seemingly broken, that it should never have worked. This is the story of one of those mistakes. Not a weak, failed creature, but a biological paradox that defied all odds, a walking contradiction that nature itself seemed to abandon, a living fossil that was too stubborn to die. This is the story of a creature that turned its own evolutionary dead end into a fortress, and in doing so, became one of the most successful survivors our planet has ever seen. In this channel, we specialize in these lost chapters, the stories of creatures that break all the rules. If you're ready to explore the edges of what life can be, to see the mistakes that outlasted the masterpieces, then subscribe. What you discover here will change how you see the natural world. The creature in question did not stalk through primordial jungles or rule the ancient seas. It existed in the shadows, a relic out of time, its very body a museum of evolutionary history. And its story begins not with a bang, but with a slow, painful crawl across a fractured world. The creature in question did not stalk through primordial jungles or rule the ancient seas. It existed in the shadows, a relic out of time, its very body a museum of evolutionary history. Its story begins not with a bang, but with a slow, painful crawl across a fractured world, a world that was tearing itself apart. Picture the supercontinent of Gondwana, not in its lush, unified glory, but in its death throes. Massive geological forces were ripping this ancient landmass into pieces, and in the widening rift between what would become Africa and South America, the waters of the nascent Atlantic Ocean began to seep in. This was not the deep, cold abyss we know today, but a shallow, warm, and isolated marine basin, a cradle of life that was rapidly turning into a trap. As the ocean deepened and the connection to the open sea narrowed, the water grew stagnant. Oxygen levels plummeted. The vibrant coral reefs and bustling schools of fish that once thrived here died off, their skeletons settling into the accumulating mud. The basin became a toxic, hypoxic prison, a place where only the most desperate or most specialized could cling to existence. And it was in this dying world, in the dark, oxygen-poor sediments of this marine graveyard, that our story's protagonist was forged. A fish that seemed to have forgotten how to be a fish. This was Latimeria. To the first paleontologists who unearthed its fossilized remains in limestone that was hundreds of millions of years old, it was a familiar face from a bygone era. It was a coelacanth, a member of an ancient lineage of lobe-finned fish that were supposed to have vanished with the dinosaurs 66 million years ago. Its fossil record was a spectacular success story that ended in abrupt, total silence. The story was simple. The coelacanths had their time. They were outcompeted by newer, more advanced fish, and they joined the legion of the extinct. They were a closed chapter, a beautiful and tragic might have been in the story of life. But the fossil record, for all its wonders, is a book with most of its pages missing. It can only tell us what died and was fortuitously preserved. It cannot tell us what quietly persisted, hiding in the world's forgotten corners. And so the coelacanth became a symbol of definitive extinction, a creature known only from stone, a ghost whose shape was etched in rock but whose flesh was lost to time. It was the very definition of a dead end, a lineage that nature had experimented with and ultimately discarded in its relentless march forward. This was the unshakable scientific consensus until a cold December day in 1938, when a phone call shattered 66 million years of certainty. Marjorie Courtenay Latimer, a curator at a small museum in East London, South Africa, was reviewing the catch from local fishermen, a routine task of sifting through the usual sharks and rays for anything unusual. Then, nestled amidst the mundane, she saw it, a fish unlike any other. It was massive, over 5 feet long, clad in heavy armor-like scales that shone with a bizarre bluish iridescence. Its fins were not the delicate rays of a modern fish, but fleshy, limb-like lobes, exactly like the fossils. And its tail was distinctive, possessing a small, supplementary lobe. Courtney Latimer, with a rising sense of historic disbelief, knew she was looking at the impossible. She was staring not at a fossil, but at the gills of a creature that had drawn its last breath just hours before. This was not a bone from the stone, but a body from the deep. The telegram she sent to the leading ichthyologist of the day, J.L.B. Smith, carried the weight of a geological epoch. "Have most interesting specimen for you. Come at once." The coelacanth was not extinct. It was alive. The ghost had not just materialized, it had washed up on shore, demanding to be seen. The mistake was not a failure, it was a survivor, and its survival rewrote the very definition of evolutionary success. The discovery was a scientific earthquake, but it was only the beginning. Finding one dead specimen was a miracle. Finding where it lived, how it behaved, was the real challenge. The coelacanth was a fugitive from deep time, and it had given humanity a single, fleeting glimpse. The hunt was now on to find its hidden world, to descend into the darkness where a billion-year-old blueprint for life had been secretly preserved. The question was no longer if it existed, but how. The discovery was a scientific earthquake, but it was only the beginning. Finding one dead specimen was a miracle. Finding where it lived, how it behaved, was the real challenge. The coelacanth was a fugitive from deep time, and it had given humanity a single, fleeting glimpse. The hunt was now on to find its hidden world, to descend into the darkness where a billion-year-old blueprint for life had been secretly preserved. The question was no longer if it existed, but how. For 14 long years, J.L.B. Smith became a man possessed, haunted by the ghost he had held in his hands. He distributed thousands of wanted posters across the coast of East Africa, offering a substantial reward for another coelacanth. It was a desperate, almost quixotic quest, searching for a needle in a continental haystack of ocean. The scientific world watched, some with hope, many with skepticism, wondering if the first specimen was just a fluke, a lone straggler that had wandered from some unknown population, now truly gone. The silence from the deep was deafening. It seemed as if the coelacanth had revealed itself once and then retreated back into the abyss, leaving only a tantalizing, unverifiable legend in its wake. The hope that had flared so brightly in 1938 was guttering, threatening to extinguish itself in the cold waters of reality. The breakthrough came not from Africa, but from a place that seemed to hold even deeper secrets. In 1952, a second coelacanth was found, but this time, it was thousands of miles away, in the remote Comoros Islands, a volcanic archipelago rising from the seabed between Madagascar and the African mainland. This was not a random accident. It was a pattern. The coelacanths were not scattered randomly through the oceans. They had a stronghold, a last redoubt in one of the most geologically complex and isolated places on the planet. The Comoros were not just islands. They were the tips of submerged mountains, their flanks plunging steeply into darkness, carved with canyons and caves that the sun's light never touched. This was the world the coelacanth had chosen, or more accurately, the world it had been forced into by a changing planet. It was a perfect refuge for a living fossil. Deep, stable, and largely inaccessible, a submerged fortress that had protected its ancient secret for millennia. The hunt now had a location, but the real mystery was only deepening. How could a fish, built on a 400-million-year-old body plan, possibly compete in the modern world? What bizarre adaptations had allowed it to persist in this eternal twilight, while its cousins either evolved into landwalkers or vanished into extinction? The answer began to emerge as scientists finally observed the coelacanth not as a dead specimen, but as a living animal. And what they discovered was a creature that had perfected the art of doing almost nothing, In the cold, oxygen-poor waters of its deep-water caves, the coelacanth moves with a surreal, ghostly slowness. It is a master of energy conservation, a virtuoso of metabolic minimalism. Its muscles are strangely flaccid and low in protein, giving its flesh an almost gristly, inedible quality, a built-in defense against predators. It does not actively hunt, but drift feeds, using the ocean currents to carry small fish and squid past its gaping mouth. It is a creature of profound patience, a living embodiment of stillness. But its most astonishing adaptation is hidden within its very blood. Unlike modern fish, which use a highly efficient hemoglobin to bind oxygen, the coelacanth has a lazy, ineffective blood chemistry. This, which should be a fatal flaw, becomes its greatest strength in the anoxic depths. Its entire metabolism is tuned to function at an incredibly low level, requiring far less oxygen to begin with. It is not fighting the lack of oxygen. It has surrendered to it, evolving to thrive in the very conditions that would suffocate most other large predators. It did not adapt to win the race. It adapted to wait out every other runner, surviving not through strength or speed, but through an almost unimaginable, eons-long lethargy. This strategy of survival through profound slowness had worked for millions of years, creating a perfect, stable equilibrium between the coelacanth and its deep-water fortress. But the world outside was changing in ways the ancient fish had never before encountered. A new predator had arrived, one that did not hunt with teeth or speed, but with nets that descended from the surface, probing the edges of its dark sanctuary. The coelacanth's greatest strength, its refusal to change, was about to become its most critical vulnerability. This strategy of survival through profound slowness had worked for millions of years, creating a perfect, stable equilibrium between the coelacanth and its deep-water fortress. But the world outside was changing in ways the ancient fish had never before encountered. A new predator had arrived, one that did not hunt with teeth or speed, but with nets that descended from the surface, probing the edges of its dark sanctuary. The coelacanth's greatest strength, its refusal to change, was about to become its most critical vulnerability. As the 20th century progressed, the waters around the Comoros saw an increase in commercial fishing, targeting species like the oilfish that shared the coelacanth's deep-water habitat. Fishermen began pulling up a shocking, and for scientists a horrifying sight: coelacanths, entangled and drowned in their gill nets, hauled up from depths of over 150 meters. Each bycatch was a tragedy, a potential extinction event for a population that numbered only in the hundreds. The coelacanth, which had survived the asteroid that killed the dinosaurs and the planetary upheavals of the ice ages, was now being threatened by a force it could not comprehend: humanity's relentless, expanding reach. Its slow, energy-efficient biology became a death sentence in the face of the nets. It lacked the burst of speed to escape, its languid movements perfectly suited to entrapment. The fugitive from deep time was being cornered in its last refuge. Yet, in a stunning twist of fate, the same biological quirks that made it vulnerable also rendered it utterly useless to its captors. The coelacanth's flesh, adapted for a low-energy existence, is saturated with oils, urea, and wax esters, making it foul-tasting and, if consumed, a powerful laxative. Its body is not food. It is a biological deterrent. This, combined with its prehistoric appearance, led local Comorian fishermen, who held their own deep-seated traditions and taboos about the ocean, to view the coelacanth with a mixture of fear and reverence. They called it Gombessa, a name that carried weight, and often saw its capture as a bad omen. This cultural protection, though unintentional, created a fragile buffer. The fishermen had no commercial incentive to target it, and every reason to avoid it. The coelacanth's unpalatability, another of its so-called mistakes, had once again become its salvation, this time protecting it from the market forces that had driven so many other species to the brink. It was a shield of sheer irrelevance in the human world. Just as science was beginning to understand the precariousness of the Comoros population, Another shockwave rippled through the biological community. In 1997, on an anniversary trip to Indonesia, a marine biologist named Mark Erdman and his wife were strolling through a fish market in North Sulawesi when they saw it. A bizarre, brown fish lying among the daily catch. It was a coelacanth, but it was not the familiar blue-scaled Latimeria shalomni of the Comoros. This one was brown. With a single photograph, Erdman had proven that the coelacanth was not a single isolated population clinging to existence in one remote archipelago. It was a genus with at least 2 distinct species, separated by thousands of miles of open ocean. The discovery of the Indonesian coelacanth, Latimeria minatoensis, was more than just a new species. It was a paradigm shift. It meant that the coelacanth's survival was not a 1 in a billion fluke. It was a viable, albeit highly specialized, life strategy that had succeeded in multiple locations. The deep-water volcanic caves and steep slopes of the Indian Ocean, it seemed, provided a network of secret refugees, a hidden archipelago of darkness where the ancient blueprint could persist. The coelacanth was not a lone fugitive. It was part of a secret society, a scattered tribe of holdouts from a different age. The discovery of a second species forced a radical reevaluation. The coelacanth was not a dying relic, but a quiet success story. It had found its niche, the deep, cold, oxygen-poor waters of the world, and had mastered it so completely that it required no further changes. Its body was not a museum piece. It was a perfectly tuned instrument for a specific, unchanging environment. But this revelation opened a door to an even deeper mystery, one locked within the creature's very genes. If its body was a time capsule, then its DNA was the lost library of instructions for building it. And when scientists finally managed to sequence the coelacanth's entire genome, they did not find a simple, primitive code. They found something far more shocking. A secret that had been written in a language evolution had not used for 400 million years. The discovery of a second species forced a radical reevaluation. The coelacanth was not a dying relic, but a quiet success story. It had found its niche, the deep, cold, oxygen-poor waters of the world, and had mastered it so completely that it required no further changes. Its body was not a museum piece. It was a perfectly tuned instrument for a specific, unchanging environment. But this revelation opened a door to an even deeper mystery, one locked within the creature's very genes. If its body was a time capsule, then its DNA was the lost library of instructions for building it. And when scientists finally managed to sequence the coelacanth's entire genome, they did not find a simple, primitive code. They found something far more shocking. A secret that had been written in a language evolution had not used for 400 million years. The genome was not a streamlined, efficient manual for a modern fish. It was a sprawling, archaic archive, filled with genetic sequences that had been deleted, edited, or repurposed in every other vertebrate lineage. The coelacanth's DNA was a living fossil in its own right, and within its labyrinthine code lay the ghost of a destiny that was never fulfilled. The most profound of these ghosts was the HOXD gene cluster, a set of genetic instructions that act as a master architect, directing the formation of limbs, fins, and digits in all backboned animals. In the coelacanth, this cluster was found in a startlingly primitive, almost untouched state. While in the lineage that led to land animals and to us, these genes were duplicated, tweaked, and specialized to build wrists, ankles, and fingers. The coelacanth's HOXD genes remained frozen, holding the original, ancestral blueprint for a fleshy, lobed fin. This was not a broken set of instructions. It was a preserved one. The coelacanth was carrying the complete, unaltered toolkit for building a limb, a toolkit its ancestors possessed but never used to walk on land. It was a genetic monument to a road not taken, a path that its own cousins, the lungfish, embarked upon with radical consequences. The coelacanth's greatest secret was not that it was primitive, but that it was conservative, a genetic hoarder that refused to discard the old ways, even as the world changed around it. Its DNA was a vault containing the original plans for a revolution that transformed the planet, plans it simply chose to ignore. This genetic conservatism extended far beyond limb development, revealing an even more bizarre survival strategy. The Coelacanth's genome evolves at a rate that is glacially slow, one of the most sluggish of any vertebrate ever studied. For millions of years, while other creatures were adapting, speciating, and racing through genetic changes, the Coelacanth's code was barely ticking over. This is not because it was under no pressure, but because its environment, the deep, cold, stable waters of the volcanic slopes, remained constant. It had found an evolutionary eddy, a backwater in the rushing river of time where the rules never changed. It did not need to adapt because its world did not demand it. Its survival was not a triumph of change, but a masterpiece of stasis. It proves that evolutionary success is not always about being the fastest, the strongest, or the smartest. Sometimes it is about being the most constant, the most patient, the most stubborn. The Coelacanth's story dismantles the very notion of a missing link. It is not a missing link. It is a preserved link, a snapshot of a moment just before one of life's greatest leaps, a moment it has sustained for over 400 million years. But this incredible stability, this perfect adaptation to a timeless world, now presents its greatest peril. The deep cold waters that have been its sanctuary for eons are now changing at a rate its genome cannot possibly match. The climate change driven by human activity is warming the oceans. And the Coelacanth's narrow thermal tolerance, another aspect of its highly specialized biology, makes it exquisitely vulnerable to even a slight increase in temperature. Its refuge is heating up, and its glacially slow rate of evolution offers no quick solutions. The creature that outlasted continents and asteroids now faces an enemy it cannot outwait. Its past, written so deeply in its unchanging genes, may have no answer for this new accelerated future. The very strategy that ensured its survival for so long has rendered it a prisoner of its own perfection, trapped in a body and a genome that cannot cope with a world that will no longer stay the same. The Coelacanth's saga forces us to confront a humbling truth about the history of life. We are not the pinnacle of evolution, but merely one of its many experiments, a branch on a tree filled with countless other possibilities. And on that tree, the Coelacanth represents a different kind of success, one not of relentless progress, but of profound, unwavering stability. Its story is a testament to the power of finding a refuge and holding on, a lesson from the deep that challenges our very definition of what it means to be a winner in the game of life. The Coelacanth's saga forces us to confront a humbling truth about the history of life. We are not the pinnacle of evolution, but merely one of its many experiments, a branch on a tree filled with countless other possibilities. And on that tree, the Coelacanth represents a different kind of success, one not of relentless progress, but of profound, unwavering stability. Its story is a testament to the power of finding a refuge and holding on, a lesson from the deep that challenges our very definition of what it means to be a winner in the game of life. This ancient fish, this so-called mistake, achieved what no other vertebrate has managed. It found a formula for existence so perfect, so perfectly suited to its unchanging world, that it simply stopped time. While dinosaurs rose and fell, while mammals scrambled from the shadows and humanity built its civilizations, the Coelacanth continued its slow, deliberate dance in the eternal twilight, a living reminder that evolutionary success is not a sprint, but an endurance race measured in geological epochs. Its survival is not despite its ancient blueprint, but because of it. This realization carries a profound and unsettling implication for our understanding of life on Earth. The Coelacanth is not alone in its defiance of the narrative of progress. It is the most famous example, but our planet's hidden corners are filled with other survivors, other biological holdouts that have perfected the art of persistence through stasis. The deep ocean trenches host creatures whose forms have remained unchanged for hundreds of millions of years, from the primitive vampire squid to the ancient frilled shark. These are not failed creatures. They are the masters of their domains, having solved the fundamental challenges of their environment so completely that further change was unnecessary. They represent the ultimate conservative strategy in evolution's playbook. If it works, don't fix it. The coelacanth is the king of these living fossils, a symbol that the history of life is not a simple, linear progression from primitive to advanced, but a complex tapestry of experiments, some of which found their perfect niche early on and saw no need to alter the winning formula. Yet, the coelacanth's enduring legacy is now facing its greatest test. The deep, cold, stable waters that have been its sanctuary for millennia are warming at an unprecedented rate. The very constancy that was its greatest strength has become its most critical vulnerability. Its glacially slow rate of genetic change offers no defense against the rapid alterations humanity has imposed upon the global climate. The creature that survived the Permian extinction and the asteroid impact now faces a threat more insidious than any it has encountered before, a threat that is changing the fundamental parameters of its refuge. The coelacanth's future hinges on a question it has never had to answer before. Can a creature that has perfected the art of staying the same survive in a world that is changing faster than ever? Its fate will be the ultimate test of whether nature's most successful mistakes have a place in the Anthropocene. The story of the coelacanth thus becomes more than just a fascinating tale from the deep. It becomes a mirror reflecting our own relationship with time and change. In our relentless pursuit of progress and transformation, we have forgotten the power of stability, the virtue of patience, the strength found in perfect adaptation to a specific place. The coelacanth reminds us that there is wisdom in the old ways, that success can be measured not in conquest, but in continuity. It is a monument to the idea that life is not always about becoming something new, but about perfecting what already works. As we stand at the precipice of a planetary transformation of our own making, the coelacanth's silent, enduring presence in the deep offers a different model of existence, one of harmony with a niche, rather than domination of a planet. It is a lesson written in flesh and blood over 400 million years, a lesson we are only now beginning to decipher. And this lesson in survival against all odds finds a strange and terrifying echo in a completely different corner of the natural world, where another ancient design has been perfected not through stillness, but through the creation of a weapon of such immense power that it can trap and consume creatures we thought were safe at the top of the food chain. The story of survival continues not in the deep ocean, but in the steamy jungles, where a different kind of evolutionary masterpiece waits in the shadows. This precise, terrifying shift in the balance of power, where the hunter becomes the hunted on a scale we can scarcely imagine, is the heart of our next investigation. It is a journey into the rainforests where a different kind of ancient blueprint has been perfected, leading to a predator that defies all expectations. The story continues with the giant spider that eats birds, evolution gone too far. The coelacanth mastered the art of stillness, but in the rainforest canopy, another timeless design has mastered the art of the ambush, proving that nature's most successful mistakes often wear the most terrifying forms.